This morning, we're going to, I'd like to take your attention a little bit to a character in the Bible that is unusual. Is a character that is in the Bible that we all know very well, and we actually like the way, all the history, the way he performed in the Bible, and everything, the way he acts. So, and I'm talking about Daniel. So, Daniel was 17 years old. We're talking about a young man from a wealthy family. Daniel, he had access to the palace, had a father, a mother. Daniel had a school, maybe he had a girlfriend, who knows, right? Daniel was a guy that had comfort. So Daniel was that type of a man that was a smart man. Everybody would look at Daniel and tell him, this young man have a bright future. Wow, this was Daniel. But overnight, everything in Daniel's life crushed. And now he is walked for 6 months, and he has no house, no comfort, no palace, no mother, no father, no girlfriend. And very soon, somebody is going to tell him that he has no name, and he's going to insist a little bit and going to tell him that he has no God. Well, do you believe in God? Yes or no? And do you believe God is omnipotent? Yes. Daniel was surrounded by people that believed that there were different gods for different things, but none of the gods of Babylon could do everything. It was normal for a Babylonian to say that it didn't happen because Nabu couldn't do it. It didn't happen because Marduk could not do it. This is not the specialty of Baal or Baal. So that was normal for Babylonians to say that, because their God could not do everything. Do you believe our God can do everything? Yes. It means that everything that happens or didn't happen in your life was because of God's will. Do you believe God is perfect? Yes or no? Yes. Yes. His perfect plan consists of the Babylonians going through Jerusalem, taking the city, arresting the king, stealing the belongings from the temple, and destroy everything. They also grabbed some young men and headed back to Babylon. Then you ask, wow, this is a plan, God? And he said, yes. A perfect plan? He said, yes. Wow, what is perfection on this? But I have to tell you, sometimes God's perfect plan doesn't look perfect to us, right? The invasion of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar seemed like a disaster, but though God raised up a man, he raised up Daniel, who would display unwavering trust in him. Even in Babylon, a land filled with idolatry and pride, Daniel stood as a testimony of what it means to have the mind of Christ. It was perfect of God's divine plan. Yes. Although Daniel was a captive, he was never a victim. He was part of God's perfect plan. Is it good to believe in a perfect God? Yes. Of course it is. It's easy. Sometimes others may be going to say no. And all that you have talked to God about it and did not understand, it is not because of his imperfect explanation. It will always be because of your capacity to understand. If you relate to a perfect being, know that all the mistakes of the relationship are always yours. Always. Sometimes we say, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God this and that. Did you ever see people say this? But God is saying, before you get here, you're going to have to answer my questions. But He is perfect. And there is a 17 years old man dealing with the perfection of a God that in His plan is the permission for Nebuchadnezzar destroy everything. The first momentum between the first time, the first encounter between Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel is something that I want you to pay attention to. Daniel was now in the palace, on this the Chaldean school, right, system for 3 years. He had to spend 3 years there. And that is where he found his first challenge. And his first challenge was that his refusal to eat. Wow. And now we see Daniel chapter 1, verse 5 that says, the king assigned then a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years. And after that, they were to enter the king's service. The king ordered that they should daily receive the delicacies from the king's table. Do you believe if Daniel ate from king's table? Daniel ate from the king's table. No. Let's see. Let's try to understand. Daniel 2, 48, 49. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained where? Remained in the palace. But look at verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. Offering there stands for food. So, he spent a lot of time. Do you think that he spent all this time without eating anything? No, he ate. Do you think in the king's table only have a crop food? No, there were a lot of things that he could look and choose from. Daniel probably said, okay, this drink have alcohol, I'm not going to drink this. But that is a juice, I can drink that. Oh, this is shrimp, I don't eat this kind of thing. But that pastry is there, that bread I can eat. Right? So, Daniel ate from the king's table. Look what's in Daniel 10, 1 to 3. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. How long? For 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotion at all until the 3 weeks were over. So we are talking about 3 weeks. What about the rest of the time? Of course, Daniel ate from the king's table. Daniel wasn't impure, and he did not become impure. Daniel's life was not defined by what he didn't do, but the refusal to do certain things because of what he was called to do. if you stop eating a lot of things in your house, your neighbors' lives are going to change because of that? No. But if you stop eating crop food in your house in order to become someone that is going to reflect Christ in your neighbor's life, then you can change the world. If I stop eating, if I stop dressing appropriately, if I stop listening for inappropriate things, if I stop doing all of these, and the only reason I stop doing this is because of me, the logic of whoever lives around me is the same. They're not going to see any change. They're going to find it's the same Dalton of every time. The logic is going to be the same. Everything we do has to be to glorify God. Daniel, look at this, in Daniel chapter 1, verse 5 to 8. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them a new names. To Daniel, he named him Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. So the chief official, we have to pay attention to what's going on over here. Okay? He came to Daniel. Don't say, the Bible said he was a chief. He was a boss there in the palace. And he said, "Hey boy, what's your name?" He said, "My name is Daniel." Hebrew, this name, huh? Yes. Okay. And what that means? That means that God is my judge. Where is your God? You're my slave, Daniel. Where is your God? If I don't put food on the table, you don't eat. If I don't put wine, you don't drink. If I don't command my people to bring clothes here, you're not going to dress. The Lord is your judge, Daniel? Daniel, who is taking care of your life is Marduk. Okay? Marduk is the one that's taking care of your life. And that's why I'm going to change your name to Belshazzar. Okay? Because Marduk is the one who is taking care of you, is the one that is sustaining your life. And so now this is your name, because it is Bel who sustains your life. You know what was the Daniel's answer? I'm going to tell you Daniel's answer. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Wow. Daniel, what a message, huh? Because when the guy said, "Hey, your name is Belshazzar, and he is your God. He is the one that is sustaining your life." Daniel said, no. Daniel doesn't reject items from the table. He rejects the provider of the table. It doesn't matter to Daniel if it looks good. Doesn't matter. If it's not from God, who is my judge, I don't want it. Now I want to make it very clear, this is Daniel saying, that who is sustaining my life is the Lord. And 10 days later, he was the most intelligent man of the kingdom. Okay? So, why does Daniel stand out as the wisest person in the whole kingdom? Why? Daniel was a smart man. We all agree with that, right? So, give me an IQ number of a smart person. Give me an IQ number, okay? Give me. 140. I like this number. Anybody want to say something else? So, listen. above 130, you are considered gifted. Above 130 and higher, you are considered gifted. So I'm going to do one thing. As I have only one person that suggests a number, I'm going to kick this up to 180. Can I? Okay, 180. And why I'm doing that? Because the king was surrounded by people that was considered wise people. Don't you know? The same thing they were doing with Daniel. Bring them and train them in a school and make them be wise, understand everything from the Babylonians, send them to me in 3 years. He did with other peoples that they grab it. So, oh, this is very smart man. Okay, bring it to me. So anyways, I have to make sure Daniel is going to be in a high stand. Here, Daniel, let's say 180. And that's why I like to say here for you, in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them how many times? 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Can you imagine that? 10 times 180. How much is that? 1,800. Can you imagine a 1,800 IQ? Cannot even imagine that, right? Cannot even imagine. Look, what makes Daniel 10 times wiser than everyone else? Daniel had one thing. God gave him the power to interpret dreams and visions. He had a mind that understood God's language. He had access to understand the word that I am going to tell you now, and the word is this: revelation. Wow. I can give you an example. Let's say you and a friend, or a group of friends. You guys are talking, okay? And you're talking about a lot of different things. None of them have, let's say, knowledge in political science. None of them understand anything about international relations. But you guys are talking. And during the conversation, somebody suggests that China is going to be the most powerful country in the coming years. And the conversation ends like that. Ends in China. What are you going to say? No. Why are you going to say no? Because you are a PhD in international relations? No. Because God said so. If somebody goes to Daniel and say, hey, Daniel, after Babylon, is going to come Greece. Daniel said, no. After Babylon is going to come Persia. Hey, Daniel, why not? Are you see now the configuration of the world? No. But why then you say that is Persia is coming? Because God said so. Wow. You know? So is in 1 Corinthians 2, 6-9 we read, we do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of the age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who loved him. Be careful, because this text here is not talking about heaven. This text is talking about wisdom. The text isn't saying that you're going to get to heaven and see a lot of things there that you didn't imagine. But it also not saying that you're going to get there and you're going to say, I knew. Okay? What the apostle is saying here is that God's wisdom is not discovered. You can be a genius of the planet. If God doesn't tell you, you don't know. But he decided to tell us. And look at this in 1 Corinthians. These are the things God has revealed to us by His Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. What we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given to us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual realities with the Spirit-taught words. I'm going to read number 16. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. To have the mind of Christ is when Christ takes the brain that thinks like a human brain, turns it off, and puts on a brain of Christ, so that you think, interpret, and see things like Christ. You do not discover things of Christ. You do not hear of things of Christ. You do not see the things of Christ. You do not imagine things of Christ. Christ tells you through the Holy Spirit, that is in the message, there has never been in history a great discovery about God. Everything we know about God, He told us. Everything. What did Daniel have that made him wiser than everybody else? The mind of Christ, which makes him absolutely more prepared than anyone else. This was Daniel in Babylon. He had the logic of the mind of Christ. So what's the name that Nebuchadnezzar put in Daniel? Belshazzar, right? That was the name. Nebuchadnezzar, I think he likes this name very much because he named his grandson the same name. Okay? So, Daniel 5:1-4, King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and the silver globules that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had to put a correction here where it says his father is actually his grandfather. Nebuchadnezzar, he heard his grandson the kingdom. He made him heir of the kingdom. Had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold globules that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised who? The gods of gold. Gods of what? The gods of silver, bronze, iron, what else? Wood, and what else? The god of stone. So, we have here then what was happening there. We was having a party, a Babylonian party, right? So, but you see there is something here that you have to pay attention. There is something intentional here. Because the king, he could eat from any plate. He could drink from any cup. But what he did? He said, no. Bring those cups and plates that my grandfather took from the temple in Jerusalem. What is the king Belshazzar trying to tell the world when he asked to bring the belongings of the temple in Jerusalem? Who is this God? That's what he's saying. Who is this God that you're talking about? Bring his plate here. I'm going to eat from his plate. Bring his cup here. I'm going to drink from his cup. And he now starts to telling all his assistants, bring everything here. And now this guy put the sound at max, and he bring the concubines, and they're all enjoying life. And he said, I'm going to drink from this cup, and you guys going to join me, and we're going to have a very good time together. Wow. That was a big mistake that this guy did. But now listen to this. Have you ever felt bad before God? Have you ever felt bad before God? Has it ever happened that you were aware of the presence of God and you still say, I'm worthless? Maybe you were saying, wow, what's going on with me? And feel crumbled by your own dignity and sin? Well, I need to tell you this. The sense of indignity is produced by God, not by our own heart. The human heart, when is before God and drowned in sin, create this kind of reaction. Exactly the same kind of a reaction. This was a big challenge to God, right? Big challenge. You just go to God and you challenge him too much. Okay? So, but we need to understand one thing. God is not a teddy bear that we can play with him. Okay? It's not. Pharaoh, you know what this guy said? Who is God? Who is this God that you're talking about? Tell him to come and talk to me. Okay? Who is this God that is saying that Israel is his son? And then God goes there and tell Pharaoh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. If my son is not allowed to go, your firstborn gonna die. Wow. And if you guys want to follow where I'm taking this from, Exodus 4:22. Herod, remember this guy? Wow. And Luke 23:8-9. Okay, so we can find something about this man as well. Okay, so because he came to Jesus, hey, Jesus, wow, I heard about you, right? So can you do something that I can see? I heard about you. It's not in the Bible what I'm going to say, but this is exactly what is there. Because Jesus just told to him, next time we see each other, the one that's going to be bleeding is you. And finish the discussion. No more talking. Okay? Because Jesus knew about what was going in his heart. Pilate. This was another guy. John 19, 10 and 11. Jesus. Wow. Don't you know that I have the power to release you or to condemn you? Don't you know that? And Jesus said, no power. You have no power to give it for you if it was not coming from above. Wow. And there is Belshazzar throwing a huge party on God's account. Okay? Using God's sacred vessels from the temple. And here we have, suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrought on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrought. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. And what he started to do? The king called out for the fortune tellers, the astrologers, the diviners, all this bunch of people that you can see there. He started calling all these guys because he was getting despaired because of the hand is scratching the wall right, mene, tekel, parsin. Wow. He said, what's going on here? But he started then to call all these guys. But to do what? When you read this story, did you ask yourself, why he called all these guys? Do these people can do anything? No. Okay? He called these people to tell him what was going on. And we all know the story. I don't have to go through it here. Okay? But as the story unfolds, when no one solved the problem, I'm talking about this bunch there. When no one solved the problem, then the grandma show up. The grandma show up, and she start looking at Belshazzar, and she said, a man called Daniel, a man named Daniel can solve this problem. Daniel had firmly decided to keep his biblical mind. When the most powerful man in the world said, your name will be Belshazzar, 70 years later, Nebuchadnezzar's wife appears in the great room in the palace, and she said, a man called Daniel. The position of Daniel makes that every time he appears, he always controls the narrative. Because he's never alone in any point of the story. Keep this in mind. In this meeting between Belshazzar and Belshazzar, Daniel prevailed. The king Belshazzar was Belshazzar from the beginning to the end. Daniel, when they told him, your name is going to be Belshazzar, he said, I'm much more Daniel than you think. I'm much more Daniel than you think. You know what this is? Daniel chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. But he was troubled after he had this dream. He was not understanding. He was kind of confused. So he could not do nothing for himself to know the meaning of this. And there we know that again, he called that bunch that I showed there on the bottom, okay? So it was his group. And they asked them to give him the translation of the, how would you call here? The interpretation of his dream. But I want you to note what is a biblical mind. For Nebuchadnezzar, was this a dream? You think this was a dream for him? No. It was a nightmare for him. Because no one makes an achievement that size for someone to tell him that he will pass. And that the Persian will take over. Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it was this one there. The gold statue. This was his dream. What he's trying to say with the whole golden statue, my kingdom is not going to pass. But we know the king, astrologers and diviners, they could not do anything. And what the king said then, okay, you know what? I'm going to exterminate with all of you. And the king, he did. He wrote a decree and said, okay, kill them all. Take all these people from the face of the earth. And then Arioch, what the chief in command to go and kill them all, he went to see Daniel. Don't forget that Daniel was one of the wisest person in the kingdom. And Daniel said, hey, relax. Why are you so rushed? Where are you going? Right? So hold on, let me go talk to the king first. And he went to see the king. And after that, he asked for time. And then he went home. And when everybody was pulling their hair, you know what Daniel did? He went to his room. He prayed. And he slept. That's it. So, and during that night, you know what happened? God gave to him the dream. And the next morning, Daniel got up early in the morning. He headed to the palace, right? Because he had something to tell the king. And now I want to invite you to enter the temple so that we can hear Daniel explain the dream to the king. Let's go there together. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and mighty and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them. You are that head of gold. Can you imagine Nebuchadnezzar's face? Yeah, I am the big one. I am the head. I am the golden. You know what? He was so happy. But then Daniel said, but after is going to come another kingdom. And then there's going to come another kingdom. And there's going to come another kingdom. And now we probably can imagine Nebuchadnezzar's face was not so happy no more. He was trying to start to open. What this guy is telling me here, right? But then we have to continue here, because Daniel came to a point and he said, but there is something else. And the king asked, what is there? And then I'm going to have a rock. And this rock is going to destroy everything. And now the king probably was confused with that, right? But Daniel was happy telling the king all these things, because it was the kingdom of God that triumphed. He remembered one day he left home and came out of what he considered the capital of the kingdom of God on earth. And he said, no matter what you did, at the end of the story, what remains is the rock. It doesn't matter if the head symbolizes your kingdom, and if others come after, at the end comes the rock and destroy everything, and that's it. That's the dream. He gave him the message right there. That's it. What Daniel is telling us in chapter 2 is that we will only be able to tell the dream of God when you and God have the same dream. Daniel had the mind of Christ. He not only knew what God knew, he wanted what God wanted. When he told the king about the rock, he didn't say relax and kind of, he was maybe saying something by heart, some message. No, he was happy to tell the king. He had sparkles in his eyes, because he said he dreamed the same dream as God. I repeat, to have the mind of Christ is not only knowing what Christ knows, it is also wanting what Christ wanted. This is so serious that there are Jesus' words to Mary at his feet. He looks at Martha and said, Martha, that's fine, but I don't want that plate of food. What I would like is for you to be here at my feet, like your sister. She is here because she chose to be here. But let's keep on going here in Daniel 5:31. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of how much? 62. And we go into Daniel chapter 9, and that we read, in the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, a Mede by descent, who was made ruler over the Babylonian kingdom. So we see that chapter 5 and chapter 9 is on the same year. And in verses 2 of Daniel 9, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood from the scriptures, according to the word of the Lord given to Jeremiah the prophet, that the desolation of the Jerusalem would last 70 years. Daniel had the dream of the animals. Daniel had the dream of the statues. But in the middle of the book of Daniel, there is one thing we cannot ignore. I, Daniel, understood from the scriptures, from the books. He understood that God had a plan for his people. Here's Daniel saying, I had a dream and vision. But not only that, I know from dreams and vision, when I saw the world the way it was, I grabbed my books to study prophecy, to know what God said about that time. Daniel is talking very serious to each one of us here, brothers. 2025 is here, and we see what's going on around the world. We see wars everywhere. And what do you do? What? Daniel studied the books to see what was happening. Daniel did not bet on any ideas of the world. 2025, the world is polarizing and coming to our families. And what we do? Daniel was grabbing his books to study, to understand what was going on. Wow. And Daniel, he was studying the books with what I'm talking to you about. It is this. It's something that all of us have in our house. God never formed an army of only intelligent people. He always changed the world with an army of obedience. Always. Moses was the most educated man of his time. But the message to Moses from God was, what do you have in your hand? And he was a very, very educated man. And God did so much. He changed so much in the lives of the people using his rod. Wow. Paul was also very educated. Very. And in 2 Timothy 4:13, Paul was in his final days. The death decree, the blade near his neck. He was in his final moments, but he was still giving instruction to the churches. And he told his friend, I need you to bring something for me. Bring me my books. He was going to die, but he wants to see the books. And what he said, I consider it all waste in favor of knowing Christ. To think like him, to live like him, and to have his mind. So Daniel chapter 5, we have the encounter of Belshazzar, and you know what happened already. But Daniel chapter 6 tells the story of when Daniel looked out of his window. And the window, he was facing Jerusalem. In Daniel 6:10, we see now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done when? He had done before. Wow. But then maybe you're going to ask, why Daniel was praying? Why Daniel was in this window facing Jerusalem? And now we're going to find in 2 Chronicles 6:34. When your people go to war against their enemies, whenever you send them, and when they pray to you toward this city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, and I like to read number 35 as well, that's not there. Then hear from heaven their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause. Wow. Daniel built his house based on the Bible text. The engineer maybe asked Daniel, sir, how would you like your room? Maybe Daniel said, I don't know, but the window have to be faced to Jerusalem. But why, sir? Maybe you have a more sunlight? No. It's because Solomon was, when he prayed in the book of Chronicles, he said that when we are not home, our window have to face home. Wow. Daniel built his house based on the text. He ate based on the text. He dressed based on the text. I think Daniel was a text, right? Was he a genius? Was he a genius? No. He had the mind of Christ. Here comes Daniel. Daniel is coming. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, hey, are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah? Now, I have heard that you are able to give interpretation and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a golden chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. And look what Daniel said. You may keep your gifts for yourself. He probably was thinking, you're going to die soon. And give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writings for the king and tell him and tell what it means. Oh yeah? The king may be asked, right? And what that means? What do you think that Daniel told him? Huh? What do you think that Daniel told him? Daniel said, game is over for you. That's exactly what Daniel told him. Game is over for you. Belshazzar had only a few more hours to live, but he did not know that. What God said to Belshazzar is something very important, because when Daniel came into the king's presence and said, I'm going to tell you, and if Belshazzar only had a few hours more to live, that message was not only for him. That message is for us as well. Daniel started speaking in verse 22. But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, thought you knew all things. What he's saying here is, you have been weighted on the scales and found one thing. The scale here is not a digital scale. It's this old type of scale. The young people, the little ones, maybe don't know what we are seeing over here now. But this kind of scale here is the one that we understand, like is the one that we put it as weights and pesos e medidas. What is that? Weights and measurements, right? So, and this is exactly what was going on over here. This is what Daniel is trying to tell Belshazzar. It is with this scale in mind that we understand God's judgment. I made you, Belshazzar, grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and you witnesses when your grandfather was humiliated. You saw how he got converted and everything that happened to him. Even though you saw everything that happened to your grandfather, you still didn't humble yourself and your heart. And the verse ends like this. You knew all of these things. That means in God's judgment, on one side of the scale was you and I, and on the other side, everything we know. On one side is God's judgment, you and I, and the other side is everything we don't know because we did not want to know. Wow. I have to tell you this because this is part of the gospel. We are responsible. We are responsible for everything that God reveals to us, and also responsible for everything He has revealed and we did not want to know about it. Maybe I should repeat this because it's very important. We are responsible for everything that God reveals to us, and also responsible for everything He has revealed and we did not want to know about it. We have an example in the Bible. He's a man named Pilate. The spirit of prophecy manifested in his house, but he chose to trust himself. And the condemnation came because no one else heard more of Jesus during the passion of Christ than Pilate. It is the long dialogue in the Bible. You can go to check. It's the longest dialogue. Pilate, I am going to die, but you don't have to be responsible. Jesus tried everything to save Pilate, but he was condemned by everything that he knew about it. We all have access to the Bible, and God tells us His plan to empower us and give to us the mind of Christ. He says, learn how I think, and your life will be transformed. Belshazzar had a second condemnation. He was irreverent. He was condemned because he knew because what is sacred is sacred. When God separates, He separates, and everything He separated, He consecrated and put as a symbol of reverence. He did not permit us to do what we think we can do. I want to emphasize this. Do you believe in an omnipotent God? You guys said yes at the beginning. Does that mean you are before Him in what circumstances of your life? Always. Is that correct? Does that mean that we have to be reverent in the church? Yes. Always. How many times do we come to the church? One time, right? A week. But when we are in the presence of God, we are in the presence of God always. Always. Does that mean we need to be reverent at work? At the gym? At school? Maybe I should put a word for the young people too at school, right? Not only work. Right? Yes, always. Belshazzar wasn't in the church. He was in his house, and God told him, I am omnipresent. You live reverently. Belshazzar was condemned for one more reason. Is it Daniel chapter 5? Chapter 5 from Daniel, and the verse 23 we read, and is right here. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the globules from his temple brought to you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understanding. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Wow. Belshazzar was judged for what he knew, the way he acted toward things consecrated to God, and because God gave him resources and he did not use them. God was telling him, in other words, you had a lot of things in your hands, and the purpose of these things were for the honor and glory of God. God did not give us the option to live. And I want you to pay attention to this. God did not give us the option to live without Him or for Him. He gave us the option to live with Him. There is no life without Him. But maybe you say, but Brother Dalton, what about the future? There will be no one. Actually, in the future, there will be only one kind of people. Those that live for Him and those who don't live for Him, there is no future for them. But you can live with Him by choice. However, you will be a lot happier when you choose to live with Him. When you kneel beside your bed and you pray, it's guaranteed that you're going to have a good night of sleep. Guaranteed. Daniel, brethren, he slept with lions. Daniel is slept with lions, while Belshazzar was wide awake in the palace. Couldn't sleep. Daniel had this assurance that life is better with Jesus in it. So, I could tell you a great story about these boys, but I think probably you guys want to go home. I pushed it longer than I expected. Maybe next time, but that is a very nice story that could connect very well with the message. But I want to tell you one more thing. The world we are living needs people like Daniel. Yes. And needs people like Daniel. People who understand the language and the writings of heaven. The one who understands heaven's writings was the one whose window was open toward Jerusalem. He was the one that was talking to God. There was not those who build palaces with solid walls without windows. With what they saw on the walls was a message of condemnation. And even though they didn't know how to read that message, the only one that knew how to read that message was the one that was in contact with God, was the one that was in full obedience to God. So, when your heart is open to God, you can hear His voice, and not only that, you can understand His message. May God bless each one of you. Amen.